Building a business is a grind, but the best lessons, sometimes they come after the fact. The Opry Business Podcast is where your host, Becca Babbix, sits down with entrepreneurs, marketers, and growth pros to talk about what worked, what didn't, and what makes the journey all worth it. No fluff, no corporate jargon, just real, down-to-earth conversations about scaling, marketing, and standing out. So grab a seat, kick back, and let's dive in.
Hello and welcome to the Opry Business Podcast. I am so excited for today's episode. I am interviewing Chris McKleroy, the CEO and founder of Nocs. And you guys get just an inside scoop today. Chris has been my friend for over 20 years and we are catching up for the first time in like 3 years. So you're just gonna listen along as me and Chris catch up on him, his life, and his hyper successful business. Chris, in your own words, tell us who you are and what you do.
In my own words, well, I'll speak English here at least. I am, I'd say like a design entrepreneur, and my career has been identifying products that are really cool and awesome that kind of aren't meeting the modern consumer like aesthetic and taste, and really just trying to help position awesome things with brands and design that can reach a lot of people. And so right now, working on binoculars and started Nocs Provisions officially in 2019. It had been an idea I'd been playing around with, talking with different factories since about 2017, which was at the conclusion of Boombotix, which was a Bluetooth speaker brand where we took, in 2010, we looked at the landscape of Bluetooth speakers. They're all boring little black boxes, and added color and style and brand and watch that thing work. So when that thing ended, that was the only playbook that I knew. And I've been applying that to the binoculars ever since.
Yeah, I was hoping Boombotix would come up. Super special place in my heart. I hope Leaf listens to this episode. But yeah, Boombotix was like I never even knew you could be like an entrepreneur. And then Leaf and you guys were doing that 20 years ago. It's like the first OG entrepreneurs who were actually creating products and marketing them, building websites and selling direct to consumer. You guys were doing that way before it was cool.
Yeah, I mean, Leaf Store is the true madman entrepreneur behind that. I mean, it was, for context for listeners, one of the earliest wearable speaker. And it was modeled after a Japanese vinyl toy that Leaf had been into collecting and painting. He's this eccentric artist and fiber optic engineer, and prototyped this little wearable speaker. And it looked crazy, and he put a belt clip on it. And we were lucky enough to be his friends and get them this little prototype samples and be like, I can't believe you made this, and I was lucky enough to join him. I have one here. I was lucky enough to join him and try to sell them, and just realized, well, if we made it look a little less crazy, if we had a less crazy looking option, maybe we could sell more to other friends. And I'm just thankful as heck for Leaf to have brought me on and allowed me to play in the sandbox, because we built that and raised venture capital, did a Kickstarter, and all of a sudden, after this whirlwind, my position was just you're the product guy. I'm wait, I designed this thing so I could sell more to make more money. By the time that whirlwind was over, it's no, you're going to China. We got sales guys. So yeah, it was a hell of an experience.
Yeah, I know. And it's what a good, exactly. You probably learned, this podcast, I want to hear more about the highs and lows of Nocs. So I'm sure there have been many, but the roller coaster that you probably went through with that round and growing that business and selling it, and for context for the speakers, you guys had a Wu-Tang collab, you guys were sponsoring professional athletes, and I don't know how much annual revenue wound up doing and wound up selling it, but I bet that experience, you got a lot of your growing pains out, and maybe it paved better pathways so that when you started Nocs, you knew what not to do.
Totally. We can transition into Nocs in that sense of Boombotix was this whirlwind. I mean, it was the longest 4 years of my life. I designed headphones with RZA. We launched a Wu-Tang album in a speaker. And I'm sitting there in like a hotel room in Dongguan with like a Dropbox of an unreleased Wu-Tang album. I'm like, this is crazy. There were some high highs, there's some low lows. Yeah, I mean, ultimately we over inventoried ourselves. Like we had a great team of people who were, I mean, this was the biggest learning, which was like Leaf, myself, Mustafa, the team was so good at like product and sales and marketing, like so dialed on that. And when we brought in a CEO to lead the business, we kind of looked at what was working and amplified it without just getting into the cash flow, counting every nickel, looking at our margins to the point where we got over inventoried and basically the wheels just totally fell off in like 1 year. Our for-hire CFO called it cratering. It was brought in about 3 months too late. So like, that was the biggest learning, was just like, no matter how hard you're killing it, you need to be monitoring cash flow at whatever size business you're at, whether you've raised venture, whether you're bootstrapped. As like a product business, that cash flow is so important. And as you scale, like if you're $100,000 business and you make a 10% mistake, okay, that's $10,000. Like maybe borrow it from your stuff. If you're $1 million business and you make a 10% mistake, $100,000, that's a lot, but you can still find like these little people that plug into your Shopify store, or, you can get a short-term loan for something. But at 10 million, a 10% mistake can tank the business. And it's the same level of mistake, but as it gets amplified, you get screwed. So we got screwed like that. I think Leaf and I both had injured, it was a grind, and I took a job in tech. It was pretty cool. Did a little stint at some crazy company that locked your phone in pouches for serving schools and comedy shows called Yonder. Really cool company, wild place to work. Really successful idea though, in creating fun free spaces. But left there pretty quickly and took a job in tech and was working on designing a powered security system and working on the marketing of that and building the Shopify store and writing the copy and making ads and doing all of this kind of new school digital stuff. Because when we got Boombotix going, I mean, I remember hard coding our checkout on our website. Like, you turn Shopify on, you have a checkout. It's already built. And Facebook ads didn't exist, back in the pure days of Instagram where there were no ads. Well, it was a lot harder to sell. And so that chapter helped me understand, like, all right, you got ad spend, you got a ROAS that you want to aim for, the Shopify store, the Klaviyo emails. Like, I kind of learned the baseline for that stuff, and I'd go to work and work on marketing a security system, which is like bringing out the fears in people. What happens if someone breaks into your house and like eats your children? It was gnarly like marketing. And I felt like that kind of just would take the commute home and think about like, wow, what if it was a binocular company? Like, what would that be? And just kind of played around with the idea enough and learned enough skills. And then I ended up going out to Bali and had a bunch of friends who were just running little businesses out of Bali. And they were selling like sunglasses and goggles in the UK, living on the island. And I just remember going, I can do the binocular. If you guys can do this here, I can do the binocular. So yeah, honestly, I think we talked when I had gotten it going. I remember talking to you on my bike ride to work, being like, Becca, trying to figure out ads, and ended up kind of not confident because of Boombotix. It was like, we were so confident. And then it cratered. I mean, we sold the business, but we did not sell the business for where we would have expected to sell it a year before. And so I was so conservative and so nervous with this that I was like, I'm not quitting my job. We are going to ship these things and see if it works. And then February 2020 rolled around, had been selling them through 2019, just in that fall there. I ordered a few hundred pieces. Honestly, it had been like an art project for me, like a design project, to design that website, the logo, the product, the packaging, all kind of like in my own little world as like a true creative expression. Like, what a world we live in where my creative expression is like commercial crap. But in 2020, our VC funding for the tech company got put on halt. I got laid off and ultimately moved to Tahoe and focused on Nocs.
Hell yeah. All right. you said that, one of your biggest learnings from Boombotix was that you guys were not managing cash flow. And, at every stage of the business, you need to be managing cash flow. Tell me more about then when you started Nocs and kind of where you are now. Like how do you manage that? Like, do you have like a P&L that you look at that's updated through like Zapier, like every single day? Like, how do you do that?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. Honestly, in like this entrepreneurial journey, and like I said, it was like a design project or a pure design project in the sense of what does that future brand look like that makes binoculars? What is the product design, the brand design, the website, the voice, the tone? How do we sell this? How do we market it? What is the product? What's the consumer experience? I just obsessed over that, and it was beautiful. And started selling in 2019, and kind of going, okay, well, at some point I need to do my accounting, you know, and ended up connecting with an old friend, acquaintance really, who I knew skied, I knew mountain biked, and he was working on the Tom Steyer campaign, which was a 2020 presidential campaign, but it was kind of fizzling out. And anyhow, he had come out and helped me with my accounting and was like, wow, this is all right. And then we continued our conversation, and I was like, well, it would be pretty cool we might need to build like a financial model, and would have dinners and whatnot. And then that whirlwind of 2020 February came around where COVID hit, tough lockdown. I booked it out as SF to tell how he also grew up with a family house in Tahoe Donner. He left the city at the same time, and we hunkered down and built a financial model for the business and worked together that year. And I kept layering on different things, like signing with the factory, working with our paid ads, what our ad spend is, what we're building in the factory. And he really had that entrepreneurial spirit. And we worked together a bit in kind of a little period, and then ended up having him join the business as a business partner, as a co-founder and CFO. And that really has allowed, I think, both of us to shine in our different areas. And it's rare to find someone who's entrepreneurially minded from an operational and financial perspective. Whereas I feel like you might find more people who are like brand and design and product entrepreneurial. So we kind of hit that left brain, right brain mix early on. And that was, like, looking back, just so important to find a partner. I think you can start something, get that traction, but in order for it to scale as like a solopreneur, you could probably burn yourself out pretty quick. So I remember we kind of made our business partnership official, and I went to Moab and rode bikes for a week, and then went to Sedona and picked up a dog, and it was just great. He's like, I got you. I'll cover the communications. And so, I do look back and notice that having a business partner or a co-founder really made a lot of sense, especially with that sort of skill set. Transitioning gears though. So we built a financial model and used, I think, like some accounting software, QuickBooks, to keep tabs on our accounting. And when it's a DTC only brand, it's pretty easy, right? I'm sure with an AI tool, the DTC only brand, you can like have your accounting done. But with Nocs, we pretty quickly got on the radar of REI. So in this period of 2020, 2021, we got in touch with REI, and they, saw our brand. We had been on their radar as a company that they admired. And because of our values, because we're supporting, getting people from underserved communities into nature, funding those orgs that are led by those who they're trying to help, offsetting our carbon emissions, they're like, look, we like what you're about. We'll bring you in. Some of these other guys, they took some brands out and made room for us. And we realized, like, at this point, we needed to hire more headcount to just keep the operation of the business going. But at that point, we made kind of the conscious decision to install NetSuite, which is this like monstrous ERP for pretty big organizations as a really small org. And that ended up being such a crucial tool for us to install at an early stage. It's not cheap, but when you're like, well, it's not cheap for software, but if you have to put someone in place at like an entry level and an operational role to do that work, like the software can scale. And so we built NetSuite out when we were still small, and that allowed us to actually implement it without like crazy complexity. So yeah, looking back, those two factors, a great business partner and using software as a tool to scale. So through NetSuite, I think nowadays we just...
Tell me more about NetSuite. Tell me exactly what it does, how you use it.
So we use NetSuite basically as like the brain of the back end of the business. So NetSuite has all of our inventory in one place and basically all of our transactions in one place. So Amazon is connected to NetSuite, Shopify is connected to NetSuite. All of our individual purchase orders for shops, our EDI stuff for bigger orders is connected. So it just kind of has, instead of like manually piecing together your accounting, everything kind of, all the inventory comes in there and all the inventory goes out and cash goes in and out. And it just allows us at the end of each month to kind of reconcile a few transactions, but ultimately spit out like a P&L or a balance sheet. And it also just allows like inventory management to be in one place rather than like on a manually updated spreadsheet. And it's an interesting tool because I think we're starting now to like use more forecasting tools like planning and budgeting through that. I think it's really allowed us to just have a more central view of what's going on in the back end of the business.
Yeah. Yeah. So I bet, I mean, probably at the time, like you said, it was probably a really expensive tool and maybe still is. You're almost like hiring ahead of growth. Like, you know, it's like kind of like what I'm doing in my business is like, well, we've got to hire head of growth, which is like really scary because then if we don't get the business in and we don't make the sales, like, you know, like but was that kind of what it felt like at that point?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it did. I mean, honestly, it was really the two of us were operating a business that was shipping to REI and a few hundred doors and running Amazon and Shopify. And we actually realized we needed a software to help maintain this. And I remember David and I sat down and like whiteboarded out a full like diagram of how the flow would work and inventory and direct to consumer orders and wholesale orders. And then we're like, we could build this. We should build this. And we talked to our web developer and our developer's like, yeah, I could build it. And we were like, yeah. And then I think we like slept on it, or David talked to his partner who's like a software engineer, and they were like, do not build that. Like, it's crazy. And so, yeah, through kind of like defining what we wanted, we found NetSuite, and it's just allowed us then to rely less on like manually managing wholesale orders and accounting and inventory, and more so just have it humming in the background where we can allocate inventory by channel. And I think just plan a bit more from a cash flow and forecasting perspective. But yeah, I think, that was something where David was like, it was great. He was very insistent on bringing that on. And we realized at our little tiny startup stage, we could help negotiate with their Oracle sales people to be like, look, we're so small. You can't like gouge us like the other people. But it does feel like like it would be definitely someone's full-time job to manage all that information. And now it feels like we can kind of scale with that.
Yeah, super, super cool. Well, so I'm so curious, like you talked a little bit about like REI. Somehow you got on REI's radar. Normally it happens the other way around where like REI is on your radar and you're trying to get into REI. It's like somehow you had built this thing and they were like, we're moving other people out to get you guys in, which I think is super cool. But you mentioned that it was about like your brand and your values and the stuff that you were doing, the alignment there. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. And I know that you're not the type of person that just wants to create a brand or start a company just to make money, right? Like you are very much a type of person who sees greater good in the world and wants to align like what you're doing with that greater good. So I'd love to hear more about that whole brand story and some of the stuff that you're doing, with your core values and the missions and people that you support.
Cool. Great question. Yeah, we got to tie it back. we got to tie it back to where it all came from. You know, it was very eye-opening at the end of Boombotix to see all of the return inventory and to see all the packaging that was, you know, just empty packaging and products that had failed in the field. You go back to the warehouse, and I remember looking at a pallet, like a full pallet with like cardboard 3 feet up either side of just speakers and headphones that I had designed, that I had signed all the POs for. And I'm like, damn, I created, that is all garbage. Like, I mean, that's, no one sees that. You buy stuff as a consumer, you're like, oh, I gotta get rid of this little thing or throw away one package. It's small. But when you're on the brand side, you're like, holy shit, this is a lot. This is shipping containers worth of stuff. And, you know, the idea for binoculars came about. A good friend who I was living with came back from the music festival and was like, man, if only we had some stylish binoculars. Like, that would have been great at the music festival, because you can't be out there with some big, like, black tactical things that looks like you're creeping, you know? So we bought some binoculars, played around with them, and I kind of looked at the industry as like, oh, wow, it's all black, boring, tactical stuff, and all the brands have no backbone, and look, they're talking to hunters, they're talking to no one. Great opportunity. But then it's like, do you want to bring something into the world? Like, do you want to mass produce stuff and ship it? Like, no, you don't. That's not, you don't want to make more stuff, right? Like, it's not good for the world.
Yeah.
But the truth is, with a product like our binoculars, and this is really like what we're about is connecting, you know, finding that like a mindful observation of the natural world, where you can really see the kind of natural essence that's connected to all living things. And through that conscious observation, I mean, using a binocular is almost like entering a visual meditation portal. There's no more distraction around the edge of your vision. You're just focused on what you're looking at. And when you see like a little raccoon in the street that you catch in your binoculars, and it looks up at you and he's holding like a Dorito, and you're like, whoa, it's like, that's the same, we're all made of the same stuff. Like, there's this amazing essence watching birds, watching the natural world. And I think by creating a tool that gets people to go, wow, there are these, I mean, my biggest fascination is wild animals are living right next to you and me. Shoot, the reason why I'm late for the podcast is I was skiing home. When I was skiing home, I saw a coyote pop out, just running full speed as I was skiing next to it. And I'm like, it's cool, man. You don't need to run. Like, it was really beautiful. But, you know, these wild animals that coexist with us, and these birds, like, taking care of our planet, you know, is really just looking out for our wild neighbors. And anyhow, tying it back together, one, just to make a product, you got to just think long and clear about, if you're going to make something, do you really need to make something?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, the benefit of using binoculars to connect with the natural world, to see that kind of essence, and knowing that there wasn't a brand speaking this along these lines. Most brands use like big bird, competitive birding, or like kill animals. And we were like, it's celebrating that natural essence of the wild world outweighed the cons of making a binocular. And so what we did is launched with a give back of working with 1% for the planet. But our focus was really on this concept of, it's not like, I don't need to convince you to look after the environment, right? We both are skiers. We come from this world. Like, and a lot of it's an echo chamber of who we're talking to. And so the big realization was like, man, there's kids in San Francisco who live in the Mission who've never been to Golden Gate Park. And there's organizations, like the first org we supported was Trips for Kids Marin, because I wanted to use this brand as a way to give back, in the sense of helping people who didn't have access to nature get access to nature, to see the magic in it. Because if you don't see the magic and the interconnectivity and the fragility, then like, who cares?
Mm-hmm.
Why? You have all these people saying, you care about the environment. And you're like, you know, bullshit. Yeah. So this idea of indoctrination was kind of what one pillar of the brand was founded on. So this idea of what we're about, this interconnectedness, observation of the natural world, and then supporting orgs that are getting people into nature. And then on the flip side of that, we've been offsetting our carbon emissions, which is a kind of a loaded statement there. We have been measuring how many tons of CO2 we emit using the BEE method, which it's kind of like, hey, in one day you can get to like a 92% threshold of confidence, or like in 200 days you can get to 96%. So it's a good method to calculate your tons of emission, and we put together a plan to reduce emissions, and then we also put together a plan to try to capture Q and methane. We stand on that to make sure that we're trying to look after it's not like a net zero, right? It's not like, oh, we offset our emissions. It's like we have created this many emissions and we spend basically a proportional amount of the emissions that we make to recapture carbon or to stop like methane and other stuff from going into the atmosphere.
Yeah.
So basically we launched the business on, this is, I think, a big learning as well. We launched the business and did not take like venture or investor capital, because after we did that initial cash flow model, we realized, hey, you can call it the Pablo Escobar approach, but like make a bunch of binoculars, sell them, reinvest the money that you made from selling them into making more and slowly ramping your way up. And there's a lot of benefits to that from just a product manufacturing perspective. You should not do a Kickstarter and raise $10 million and then do your first production on this massive scale. It's just not going to work. Your stuff's going to be bad quality. So it's given us a way to ramp up with our factory. And then on the flip side, it's given us the opportunity to be mindful with growth. We did our 2020 was the year of hibernation and COVID and direct to consumer. But at the end of that year, we had a lot of people saying, hey, we want to rep your brand. A lot of wholesalers hitting us up. And we didn't just say, yeah, we got to go chase REI right away. We were a little more mindful to say, well, if we did wholesale, what does that mean from our business? Like, how do they order? How do we ship it? We built a back end to our Shopify store for wholesalers to go in and order, very process oriented. But getting to REI, a good friend of mine, Wiley Robinson, who runs Rumple Blankets, I'm glad to connect you with this podcast, but he is old. His dad and his uncle and parents were friends with my parents and grew up in Alpine Meadows had a cabin, San Franciscan Alpine Meadows people. So we've kind of been in each other's orbit for a while. And fun fact, I interviewed for a graphic design job at Rumple after Boombotix. And he's just like, what are you doing, dude?
I don't know if you've seen my emails lately, but I recently sent out an email and it was like a breakdown of ads, and Rumple was crushing it. If they're listening to this podcast, they're crushing their marketing. I gave them like a huge shout out. I was like, brand's killing it. Rumple was number one on the list. Yeah.
Yeah, they have an all-star team for sure. It's really cool and a great product as well. Keep one in the truck.
Cool too. I got it as a gift. It's like the most giftable. Yeah. Anyway.
That's it for part 1 of our conversation with Chris. We learned about Chris's entrepreneurial journey, his product innovation, and the lessons he learned while launching Nocs Provisions. Tune in next time to hear Chris's e-commerce strategies, the details of how he scaled Nocs, their wholesaler partnerships, and the importance of values-driven branding. That's a wrap on this episode of the Opry Business Podcast. If you got value from today's conversation, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an insight-packed episode. If you're feeling generous, leave us a review. It helps more business builders like you find the show. Got a story or a question you'd love us to cover? Connect with us at followlinedigital.com or reach out to us at podcast@followlinedigital.com. We can't wait to hear from you. Until then, keep pushing forward, keep learning, and don't forget to enjoy the journey.